Coach Vance here, Senior International Olympic Weightlifting Coach and Professor of Sport and Exercise Science. Before I want to get into how I think Olympic weightlifters should actually eat, I wanted to explore how they actually are currently eating. So in general, athletes do not have the best nutrition education. So they also have a compliance issue, the same as regular folks. So when people ask me, oh, your weightlifters must be on a special diet, how do they eat? Well, the first thing I typically do is make sure they eat enough, period. Right? So I can't tell you how often I have athletes who come and ruin their workouts and then they say, well, coach, this is the first time I ate today, right? And especially on the female side, we get a lot of my athletes that are underweight, don't like to eat that much. That's kind of just the population of weightlifters. And then, of course, it's a huge variety of different attitudes towards nutrition. Some use diet coaches, some use diet apps, some do meal tracking, some do meal prep and all of that kind of stuff. But for the most part, a lot of weightlifters just kind of eat how they feel like eating. They probably know that they have to eat a good amount of protein for recovery and muscle building. But beyond that, they kind of just try to eat what they like to eat and how often they like to eat as well, and routinely or occasionally check their weight and make sure they're not too heavy and whatnot, and then they start the process of cutting weight, getting ready for a meet, and then they pay a lot more attention to actually what they're eating. But those first 6 to 12 weeks, they're actually not paying that much attention. So there isn't a huge amount of data on how professional athletes in general eat, and then probably even less on weightlifters. It's more geared towards more popular sports like soccer and basketball and baseball, but there is a little bit of data on how they actually eat, and for some it might be surprising, but some people in the sport itself, it might actually not be that surprising. There isn't a lot of data on the diets of Olympic athletes in general, but here's some comparison surveys between the 1952 Olympics and the 1996 Games. Originally, athletes ate high protein and high fat diets. 40% of their energy actually came from fat. And meat is for the athlete was probably the attitude. And then when comparing the 96 Games, there was a lot of variability in macronutrients, especially protein. So here we see from the 96 Games, the Chinese athletes, for example, consume much higher protein than might typically be recommended, 2 to 4 grams per kilogram, and in the U.S. and Finnish athletes, 1 to 2 grams per kilogram. There you see Kakishvili. There is actually some data on professional Greek and Turkish weightlifters out there. This compared professional Greek athletes of various sports, and the protein content was actually lower, about 1 gram per kilogram, in weightlifters compared to the other sports. Volleyball had the highest protein intake. The fat level was fairly high in the weightlifters, making up about 30 to 40% of their diet in comparison to the other sports, which consumed much more carbohydrates. Surveys with Turkish professional athletes didn't show much difference in diet between level of play or age. This study was done with female Turkish weightlifters at the 2008 Games training camp, and most of the athletes were deficient in protein, carbohydrates, vitamins like B vitamins, electrolytes. But the limitation of this study may be that the athletes could have been below their energy balance to make their weight class for the upcoming Olympic Games. So as you can see, the diets probably aren't as strict as your Instagram influencer fitness person. Some of that might be cultural issues, some of that might be compliance issues, some of that might just be attitudes in general between professional athletes and their nutritional status. But as you can see, it kind of asks a bunch of questions like, how important is nutrition for professional athletes? You know, if they're winning, if they're doing well, doesn't matter that much. Does nutrition improvement, does it result in significantly better results? You know, how do carbohydrates, how do protein, how do fat actually play into this? So on the next video, we're going to look at a little bit further how I at least think that ideally a weightlifter should eat or might eat to enhance performance, and I can kind of leave it up to you whether or not it's all that important, and it might just be more important based on your level. You know, somebody who's going to be world champion no matter what, it might be less important. Somebody who needs to tone things up to beat another person by a kilo, it might make a difference.